a time to lift your feet and follow me. Boys, follow me. Pick 'em up, put 'em down and follow me. Pick 'em up, put 'em down, pick 'em up.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Study Hall. It is I, Florida's favorite creep, and your favorite creep, Night School Horror's favorite creep. And you know what? My favorite creep too. I'm my own favorite creep. Today's Study Hall is not something that you can watch. It's not something that you can stream. It's not something you could go find on YouTube. It comes from a good old-fashioned book. I'm talking paper and hardcover. For all of my reading creeps out there, this one is for you. For all of my don't want to read creeps, I mean, it's available for audiobook. If you've got Audible or if you've got Spotify, it's available on there. But you know, there's just something nice about reading a good old-fashioned book. But you know, I'm just going to jump right into it because this one's so interesting. And it's very, very zombie-esque. Imagine, if you will, Boy Scouts meets 28 weeks later. Sounds pretty creepy, right? But let me tell you about it. This book is called The Troop by Nick Cutter. And I was very interested in this book just seeing the cover because it looks very like desert island-ish. So going into it, I thought it was going to be a lot of, how do I put this? A lot of survival, almost like a Lord of the Flies situation, but with Boy Scouts. But it took on so much more. It's, oh god, it's a lot to get into. I guess I'll just start from the beginning. A little backstory on this. I had almost like a little virtual book club with my good friend Batsy. She read the book with me. Not along the same lines, but I think she read it like within a week before me. Then I read it and we compared notes. And both of us kind of came to the conclusion that this was so well written and it has an overall feeling of like gore and it leaves you kind of with a nauseous feeling thinking about everything. The book takes place in Canada on a little island, Falstaff Island. So that is where it is mostly set. You do get kind of like branch off material from like perspectives of people in the city, in the little town where they grow up, a little bit of backstory, but it mostly takes place on Falstaff Island, at least with the troop. So I was trying to compare notes with Batsy on this, of how to approach this and like what were some highlights from the book, because it's very different from what you would see writing styles. This one gets into more description than it does story, and the description kind of takes place where the gore is. So imagine a story being told, but you get the gore feeling from descriptions of things, not just the story itself. It's not just like, oh, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. It's more like, this happened, and let me describe every horrible little detail about it. And it was so good. I feel like they could have branched out and done more with this, like prequels. But I have yet to see any prequel from Nick Cutter and the Troop. There is talks about it afterwards, but Batsy was mostly interested in highlighting the newspaper bits. So as you're reading, you get storyline and then backstory from like newspaper clippings and like little articles that they included to give you more backstory of like what happened, almost as if this had already happened and you're going back and looking at the archives. So the newspaper bits made it fun and it was a clever way to bring up more information. We have a lot of appreciation for the writer addressing real world problems. Like, the characters' deaths were kind of related to what kind of people they were, or kind of facing their own traumas. So, it's a standard Boy Scout troop. Standard troop of boys and their troop leader. Scoutmaster Tim. I was so upset about Scoutmaster Tim. And I won't spoil it so much because I would really love some of you to go listen to it if you're not a reader. And for those of you that are readers, I would love for you to go read the book because there may be big things coming with it. And I certainly do hope that there are big things coming with it because I feel like I want to get the other guys at night school, the other students, the other professors in on this. But, you know, we know how they are. They're not big readers, but maybe if it was made into a series or a movie, more so a movie, I could get them in on this because the concept's very good. Overall, the book kind of leaves you with an icky feeling, and for me personally, like a little bit of anger because of a certain character's death. I mean, like, spoilers mild, only one of them lives, and one of them that dies towards the end really takes a toll on me, and that was Newt. Newt is a very interesting character, and probably a character that we all kind of know. Maybe a character that we can all kind of relate to at some point, at least in social settings. And the whole I'll say the whole problem starts because of one scientist trying to use this as military weaponization, disguised as a diet pill. So, of course, everyone's wondering, oh, do we have a quick fix? Is there just like, I could take a pill and all of my weight drops and I could eat whatever I want, I could live however I want, just a quick pill. And then when I'm ready to stop, I'm at my goal weight, I take another pill and it just ends and I'm at my goal weight and it's great. Sounds fantastic, but it's also very fiction. And we all know this. There's no such thing as a overnight diet pill that'll change your life. But in this book, there is. It's just also not good. Side effects may include, but not limited to, intense hunger all the time. A hunger so intense that you will eat inanimate objects or other people, or, bits of yourself. Also, not being able to take a secondary pill to stop this. But supposedly, it's just a tapeworm. It's supposed to be this tapeworm, you take the pill, got a tapeworm inside. It, drops you down. We all know what tapeworms do. And then you're supposed to take a secondary pill that kills the tapeworm when you're at your goal weight. And then you just expel it, much like you do any sort of waste out of your body. Great. Sounds fantastic. But the scientist never created the second pill. Ever. So now, these people are just infested with worms. Now imagine, when I say infested with worms, I mean you can see them wriggling underneath your skin. You can see them behind your eyes. You can see them moving your nails. You can see them coming out of you while you're using the bathroom. Like, worms everywhere. If you get a cut, you could see the worms inside trying to help their host, and it's very much just parasites underneath your skin. Nothing you can do, and you can infect other people with them if they get a cut, or, if you just touch them and the worm decides to wriggle underneath your skin or your fingernails or gets in your eyeball or inside of a cut. Any part of you that's exposed, these worms can get into. And it sounds downright terrifying, downright awful, and not something anyone would want to happen. But unfortunately, Patient Zero winds up on this fucking island with the Boy Scouts. Falstaff Island is now a quarantine zone. And the military, when you find out in the newspapers, is kind of like, oh, we knew about it. There was just nothing we could do about it. So we just quarantine the island, and, anything coming or going, we eliminate, no matter what. Infected or not, we can't test them. We have no way around this. It just is what it is. They're either infected and live off that island until they die, or if they try to leave the island, we myrtle them and leave it as that. But the description of these worms, you guys, the descriptions they give are so gruesome, so disturbing, that there were parts of this book I had to put down, collect myself, to make sure I wouldn't hurl, and then continue reading it. And I don't know if anyone cares, but I used to be a 911 operator, and I had to eat lunch, or breakfast, or whatever time of day it was, while listening to some of the most gruesome calls. Because, you never know when you're going to eat. You never know when your next meal is going to be, if you get, like, that call of life and you're just kind of sitting there on the phone for 4 to 10 straight hours, like, nope, have to be in this, right? Have to be ready. This book made me put down a meal before one of those calls did. Just for context. And I think part of it has to deal with the fact that it's children. Like, we're talking about children. So hearing children in these situations is already uncomfortable, but now putting children in situations where you have to describe worms coming out of places. And it's sickening to think about, because you're like, I don't want these kids to be in this situation any more than I would want to be in this situation. But then you have to remember that it's not real, and you're like, cool, it's a great work of fiction. But then part of you, conspiracy theorists like Batsy, is like, right, but this could happen. And it's like, you're absolutely right, this could happen. But let's hope it never does. But I think some of the best parts of it for me were the descriptions of worms, just because it gives you an image in your head that lets you fill in the gaps, just because it's not being shown to you on a show or a movie. It's just your imagination of what you can come up with. That's the limit. I did really like the lab articles and the news reports. They do have some of the lab articles that are like, kind of in a way where it's like, in real time, you're hearing the status report of a specimen that's been infected, and then it carries on from there until the specimen dies, or what happened with the specimen during the infection period. But I really like that writing style. It gave me context for things without having to dive into just the boy's perspective, so at times as the reader, you know things that the characters do not. And that's good writing. I really like that. It sticks out to me. I do have to go into the worst. The worst part of this book, besides the worms themselves, was a character named Shelley. Shelley is one of those characters that's great to have to be in opposition to the other characters, but I hate Shelley. I think it's safe to say most people that read this book are going to hate Shelley. If you love Shelley, I need to have a long conversation with you that may possibly end up in you being Baker acted or arrested, okay? Shelley is that character that constantly pushes the boundaries and constantly toys with other characters. And then it's just revealed that, Shelley, if he had the chance to grow up instead of being eaten alive inside out by worms, he would have been a serial killer. Hands down. He would have been a serial killer, and not an interesting one, just a terrible, gruesome, we can't learn from this ever, except that maybe, and just maybe, we need to be looking out for more signs. But he's the worst of the worst. He's disgusting, he's disturbing, he kills little animals. He, at one point in the book, and this is a major spoiler, if you don't want this major spoiler, I suggest you skip the next, 4 seconds. He says that he's going to be a father because he could feel the worms inside of him, and he feels like he wants to give birth to a worm baby. And he wants to infect all of the other children so they could all be worm baby daddies. And I'm like, you know what? This little fucking freak needs to exit this story faster than I can think. Faster than my eyes can move across the page. And, I got what I wanted, but not in the way I wanted. But it's okay. I do have to say my honorable mention for a character is Scoutmaster Tim. Scoutmaster Tim was kind of that voice of reason, and I love the way that his character was written, because he starts out as a voice of reason, a voice of being the only adult in the room, kind of being like, hey, we gotta handle this situation differently. And yes, he is the only adult in the room, but you could kind of tell this is like the coming of age story. So some of the kids, especially like Kent, have this drive to be, well, I know what I'm doing and I know I'm better than you, based on their backgrounds and home lives. But Scoutmaster Tim is the literal only adult in the room with that voice of reason saying, hey, we're handling this differently. We have to quarantine this stranger that showed up at our camp, but we also have to help him because, my God, he looks terrible. Like, he's thinking of the kids keeping him separate, but of course, Kent, quote-unquote leader of the pack in the beginning, busts down the door to see what the heck is happening because, he has to be involved. He's a nosy little bitch. So he has to be involved, no matter what. Despite Tim saying, hey, don't do that. It's a bad situation. We don't know this person. God forbid, he's dangerous. But Kent don't care. Kent busts down the door. They see this man. This man is intimidating. They're very uncomfortable. Tim kind of quarantines him, realizes that, like, hey, he's not doing so hot. And Tim used to be a doctor. Tim used to help people all around the world as a doctor. Think of, like, Doctors Without Borders, but super helpful. So Tim's trying to operate on this guy, and he kind of puts Max, another one of the boys, at risk of having him help because his dad does autopsies on dead bodies in the mortuarium. And he kind of gives him that first exposure. It's a terrible situation to put a child in, and that's where you start to see Tim's conscience kind of turn, where he's like proud voice in the room teaching the boys right from wrong, knows that this isn't going to last, to, oh my God, what have I done? I've exposed these kids. I'm in the wrong. And kind of giving the kids free rein of like, you were right, you need to lock me up. They quarantined Tim because he's starting to get infected. He feels that intense hunger that just can't be swayed. And after that, like, it's pretty much after Tim gets locked in a closet and is peeling wallpaper off the walls to eat from this insatiable hunger. It's like, all right, well, Tim's out. He's not long for this world. So the kids kind of have to take over, and it's the worst of the worst situations because now you have this power dynamic where these preteen boys, these almost teen boys, are trying to prove themselves of like who's the leader and who's better at what and who should be in charge, and it's almost like an all-out battle. It very much is kind of like Lord of the Flies in this power dynamic, but it's gruesome just to see this before the hunger even starts to take over in the boys. Before the worms start to infect the boys. It's horrible to watch. Just, you want to root for the kids that are like, yeah, he's a good kid, but you have to take it out of your mind and kind of picture it as, right, you want them to be good kids, but you also want them to survive. So instead of thinking, well, you want the good kid to survive, you have to think, the driven kid, the leader kid needs to survive. That's who's going to survive. And then as they just start picking off from the worms, you have no idea who's going to survive and who won't, because it's almost like the worms come for anybody. It's not anything you can prevent other than just not being there. Like, just not getting infected. And that's so hard to do, especially when you have zero precautions or zero knowledge about what to do. Like, you as the reader learn more about the worms than the boys do in real time. So there's nothing that they can do. But I love that the characters are written in different power dynamics. And just the show of personality and difference with the kids. I mean, overall I had this creepy and uncomfortable feeling. But, I mean, it's in the best way. It makes you want more. And it makes you want to kind of dive into the lore of it. I remember afterwards looking up characters. And, of course, the internet is going to internet. They drew some fan art of, like, what the boys looked like, what Scoutmaster Tim looked like, and then, like, what everyone looked like after they were infected by worms. And it was really interesting. Shelley is still the most disturbing and scary-looking motherfucker to me. But my thoughts at the end, because we're wrapping up this study hall, my thoughts at the end of the book is that Max is never going to be the same. He's never going to be looked at the same or grow up how he was supposed to, and that's exactly how it's written. And it kind of leaves off on this mysterious little cliffhanger of, like, does Max ever go back to the island, or is he just thinking about going back to the island? Because that's kind of where he actually died. And I don't mean, like, physically died, but I mean everything about that form of Max before the worms was left and died on that island. When he came back, the city didn't look at him the same. His parents didn't even look at him the same. The scientists didn't even look at him the same. Nobody did. And even if he goes back to his school, they're not going to look at him the same either. Nobody is. So at that point, what life is he truly living? And to get into this, last bit before the bell rings for study hall, I really enjoyed looking up more information because I stumbled upon an article that may lead the troupe into a movie. So I did ask Batsy her opinion on this, of whether it should be a movie or a series, and do you think it would flop or not? We both came up to the conclusion that it would be great as a movie. Not so much a series, because there's a lot of things being turned into a series, and series takes a little bit longer. And I feel like if it were to be a series, it would take on a character for each chapter. Like, each episode would be a character. And as much as I wouldn't mind that, I do not want a whole episode about Shelley. Fuck that kid. I don't want a whole episode about him. Turn it into a movie. That way he's getting as much screen time as he needs, not as much as he should have. Turn it into a movie. I think it would be a great movie. I think it would not flop. I mean, it would depending on the director, but we all know how that goes. Just don't let Blumhouse have it. Let anybody. Let James Wan have it. If anything, let James Wan and Nick Cutter work together on this movie. That would be fantastic. Yeah. And Batsy feels the same. It should be a movie. She thinks it would be a great movie as well. But other than that, Study Hall is coming to an end for this episode, and I'm sure we will have much to talk about next time. But until then, I will leave you all on Falstaff Island with the troupe.